Welcome to Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Corombos. Thanks for being with us. Our guest this week is retired U.S. Air Force Chief Master Sergeant Jo Keller. Chief Keller served more than 26 years in the Air Force, was part of several major military operations, and served in Iraq, the Balkans, Saudi Arabia, and other places around the world. We're also joined today by Therese Hughes, an acclaimed photographer and author. Her In a Heartbeat photography exhibit focusing on female veterans will be coming out as a book in March of 2021. Chief Keller is featured in Therese's work. Ladies, it's great to have both of you with us. Therese, I'd like to start with you and have you set the stage for our conversation with Jo. Tell our listeners, first of all, a little bit about your In a Heartbeat exhibit and the motivation behind that project.
Well, the In a Heartbeat exhibit was created at the request of Brigadier General Wilma Vaught at the Women's Memorial in Arlington, Virginia, for Veterans Day 2014. Initially, she wanted a organized video of all of the women that I have interviewed and photographed, and that was just too large for a 35-day lead time. So what I came up with was looking at equal number of veterans that were officers and enlisted from all of the branches. And this was in 2014, so I did not have the Space Force included in it. The exhibit is black and white photographs of each veteran. It tells information about their branch, where they served, what their military specialty is, and a quote that when I went back over each interview resonated with me, and a civilian felt that this would resonate with other civilians and help strengthen the military-civilian divide. So that's the story. My motivation is my mother and father were both veterans. They served during World War II. I knew my father was in the military because we followed him everywhere, to all the duty stations, but my mother never spoke of her service. And she died when I was in my 20s, and that did not give me opportunity to ask her why she served or what it meant to me. In 2010, I realized that women veterans today were invisible and wanted to do something to help raise the visibility of women veterans. The In a Heartbeat photography exhibit is one such effort. It is called In a Heartbeat because when I started interviewing all the way through to the end, I would ask the women veterans, is there anything else you want to tell me? And all of them said, essentially, if I were asked to serve again, I would do it again in a heartbeat. And this struck me as a phenomenal response because every female that I interviewed did not have an optimal service opportunities. Some of them were kind of harsh. So this In a Heartbeat speaks to service to me, to a bigger community. And it is just a phenomenal thing to hear and to witness. So that's why the photography exhibit was called In a Heartbeat.
And before we begin our conversation with Jo, how did you meet her and what about her story appealed so much to you?
I met Jo at a California Women Veterans event, I think in Riverside. I was asking women if they would be interested in letting me interview them. And that's how I met Jo. Since her interview, what interests me is the strength of her service, of her call of service, and her willingness to represent to the military and to civilians what it looks like when you serve.
So let's meet Jo Keller now. Jo, thank you very much for your time today.
Hello.
Let's begin with the very beginning of your story, Jo. Where were you born and raised?
I was born in San Francisco, California.
Was there a history of service in your family?
There wasn't a recent history. What I could remember was my uncle and his uncle serving in the Korean War in the Army. I never saw them in service or in uniform, but I knew of them.
Why did you choose the Air Force when you enlisted?
A very powerful woman at my civilian job that was talking to, I was inquiring. She didn't know why. I always wanted to serve, so I really admire her. I had thought my time had passed. I was already in my 30s. And through talking to her, I found out that I could join the Air Force Reserve in my 30s and still be able to serve. So I talked her into taking me to speak with a recruiter, and the rest is history.
Now, you joined in 1991. That is just a few months after the end of the Gulf War. Was there anything about all the attention to the military at that time that interested you, or was it really as a result of this relationship that you just described?
Actually, it had more to do with the Vietnam conflict. I always had it in my heart that I wanted to do something. I always remembered the faces of the soldiers coming back and of those leaving, and also one of my church members that came back in a casket. It was something that really made an impact on me, and for years I wanted to do something.
What was it like to be a woman in the Air Force in the early 1990s?
It was already progressive in the 1990s. And I joined a unit that was mainly female, so there was not much problem getting around or working or training. It was mostly, you just had to get to work, and you had to train, and you just had to be able to do the training to do the job, because the career field that I got into, aeromedical evacuation, was very strenuous and very long school and training. You didn't only have to know the curriculum, but you also had to be strong.
You were trained as an aeromedical evacuation technician. For those who aren't familiar with that terminology, what does that work entail, and what did your training consist of?
The work entails is taking care of patients wounded and sick, military and DOD, on aircraft going long range. We take care of the patients. We sustain life in flight and make them comfortable. We could fly anywhere in the world in multiple or different type of aircraft. The training entailed, of course, like everybody else, we went to basic military training. Then we went to what they call our school, which was a combination of nursing school, nursing courses, and emergency medical technician courses, field training, medical readiness training, which is out in the field where you learn how to carry a stretcher and bring it over a fence and drag it through the dirt, to get to your point with your patient in a safe manner. So training to work in a hospital environment and an aircraft, but also in the field. We also had to participate in survival training, which is just in case, anything ever happened and we went down, how we would survive with our patients in the field until we were rescued. We did water survival. I mean, it was about a year and a half of training away from home, and then other bases or 2 other locations for additional trainings, so that not only we could take care of the patient and we could keep them alive in transit, but, we were also responsible for their safety.
What type of flight training was involved with this? Do they teach everyone some level of what to do in all the different positions of the crew that will eventually be evacuating folks, or how did they go about that process?
Yes, when we're in an aircraft, yes, we have what they call TO checklist, technical order checklist, which would say, depending on the position that we were working on at a certain mission, what our responsibilities were to, we had to brief the patients, and then so the patients could be aware of what was going on, in what order and through what exits we would evacuate the aircraft. So, yeah, everybody had their own instructions on what to do, and together we would evacuate safely depending on the aircraft we were in.
Jo, let me stop you right there. We'll be right back with much more of your story here on Veterans Chronicles. We're speaking with retired U.S. Air Force Chief Master Sergeant Jo Keller. I'm Greg Corumbus. This is Veterans Chronicles. We're joined today by retired U.S. Air Force Chief Master Sergeant Jo Keller, veteran of more than 26 years in the U.S. Air Force, part of several major military operations, Iraq, Afghanistan, the Balkans, Saudi Arabia, and more. And Jo, I'm sure without question, the most difficult part of your time in uniform was in Saudi Arabia, the Khobar Tower attacks of 1996. You were in Saudi Arabia when al-Qaeda perpetrated that attack and you were injured. So take us back to that day, what you were doing just prior to the attack and what you remember unfolding that day.
The day was the 25th of June, 1996. Of course, a very hot day at the Khobar Towers in Saudi Arabia. After working, we would wait till it was dark and cool so we could do some kind of PT, whether it be run, walk, or some kind of exercise. So that evening, I found somebody sitting on the steps and asked them, "Hey, would you like to go for a walk?" Because we were encouraged always to walk with a buddy. So I just found the first person and asked them if they wanted to go for a walk, and they said, "Okay, sure." And so it was about 10 o'clock at night. And so we started out from our building to walk the perimeter of the Khobar Towers. And halfway through our walk, we were walking through an area where you could see the other side, like a parking lot on the outside of the compound. And there was some cars parked there, and there was some people milling around, but that was something normal to see. So we kept on walking. I did feel uncomfortable seeing the people there so close to the fence. So I kind of stepped up my walk because my partner mentioned, "Hey, why are you going so fast?" And it was just seconds later that the big boom happened. It's kind of a big blur, but I remember we had just cleared the front of the building when the big explosion happened behind us. I remember looking back and just seeing the big, like the mushroom cloud, the big gray cloud dust. In front of us was a baseball field, an empty baseball field, and we were face down on the ground. Like I said, it was a big blur, so I don't know how we ended up there. All I remember is feeling that somebody was pushing me down to the ground and squishing me. And then the next few seconds, I felt like somebody was blowing in my mouth and like I was being blown like a balloon. Then I had dirt in my mouth and I just was looking around. We didn't know if somebody was shooting us from an aircraft above or anywhere. Although we had seen people, we didn't know that the bomb actually was being set by those people and it was actually a truck bomb. So we were looking up in the sky and we were looking around to see where we could run to. When the noise stopped too, all of a sudden the whole compound was silent and made us believe, are we the only two alive? So we got ourselves up and tried to run to the first building that we could see to try to get in. But once we opened the doors, all you could see was glass coming down. So we quickly shut that and started running to the center of the compound. That night, everything, I don't know how long all this took, but all I know that the first person we ran into was my first sergeant, Master Sergeant, retired Sylvie, and he was barefoot in boxer shorts, no shirt, and bleeding from his head. But at the same time, he was still directing people to go to the center of the compound. He was still on the job. As he was directing us, we joined a group of people that was running and carrying other injured people and teammates Once we got into a clearing, we looked around, and I was like the only medical person in that area. So I started a triage center.
That's what I was going to ask, because you are trained to help treat people who are injured or who are sick. And now you are one of the people who are injured, yet you're still working to help others. Talk about what's going through your mind at this point. How serious did you think your own injuries were, and how clearly were you thinking about how to help others?
I didn't check myself. I didn't look. I just kept going forward. So I started working on others. As they were coming around me, because they noticed me as a medical folk, the people that were caring, the people just came and laid them right next to me. So I had a whole line of people that were just brought to me. So I started my own triage area. Of course, I looked around. I was pretty young in my career. I looked around because I had never been in charge. And once I saw that I was alone, I thought, well, I guess I am in charge. And I just took charge of the triage area and was able to get people, some over to the clinic and some over to ambulances that were arriving to pick up the more seriously injured folks.
One of the things I've learned from interviewing veterans and folks who have studied veterans that really separates Americans from others, and this is true in a number of situations, is the ingenuity and the training that kicks in and knowing what to do when the unplanned, the unexpected has happened. Sounds like that's exactly what happened at Khobar Towers as well. Is that right?
Absolutely. And like you said, we went with what we had. I had a young mechanic come up to me and she said, "Do you need help?" She said, "I've had a self-aid and buddy care course. I could help you." And just her willingness to help was amazing. And she did whatever I asked. Also, some third country nationals came up to me. They did not know English, but they understood that I needed water, I needed paper towels and different things. And they went back and forth getting me what they could find. Also helped me carry our injured into ambulances and into the clinic.
Chief Master Sergeant Keller, let's pause there one more time. When we come back, we'll share the rest of your story right here on Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Corumbus, and you're listening to Veterans Chronicles. Our guest today is U.S. Air Force Chief Master Sergeant Jo Keller, now retired after more than 26 years in uniform in the U.S. Air Force. In the previous segment, we learned about her harrowing experience at Khobar Towers in Saudi Arabia, June 1996, when the al-Qaeda terrorist attack struck the Khobar Towers on that evening. And despite being injured herself, she set up a triage center very near there to help others who had been wounded. And so, Chief Keller, when did you finally realize the extent of your own injuries?
It was a couple of days. My first priority after over 40 hours of working with the injured and just being covered in blood and dirt from others was to find a bar of soap and a place to shower. So priority, once I showered, I tried to lay down and get some rest. So I didn't voluntarily go to the clinic to get treated. I was trying to avoid it because I thought by getting treated, that would end my career in the Air Force. So I was just trying to take care of myself. But two officers showed up at my dorm room, and they ordered me to go to the clinic. When I was hesitant, they grabbed me. Each one had one of my arms, and they personally escorted me to the clinic to be treated and evaluated, and to have my documentation on my medical records.
What injuries had you sustained?
I had fallen forward, so I had like lacerations or injuries to my hip and my head, and I had that loud ringing in the ear. So I wasn't seriously injured, but I definitely needed treatment and follow-up for my injuries, which could have resulted in something worse had I not taken care of it.
So were you treated there, or did they move you somewhere else to receive that care?
No, I was able to be treated and released back to duty.
So I'm sure your initial response, as you've already explained, was to help those around you, to make sure you were taking care of yourself, because as you just explained, if you hadn't, those injuries could have gotten worse. But what goes through your mind when you realize that you were injured in a terrorist attack? How did it change how you viewed your service?
Well, to tell you the truth, it made me very angry that somebody could do that to us. I had enlisted to join the Air Force and serve for one term. And that day it made me angry, and I decided that I was going to stay much longer, and I was going to see this through, and I was going to get back. I was just going through different thoughts and a lot of anger because of the situation, because of the people that we lost and all the people that were injured. So it changed my way of thinking, and it made me take training more seriously. Our training and our training gear, our safety equipment, everything else, everything came to light, like what we were supposed to wear and what we were supposed to take and how we were supposed to act. Everything came into perspective and was clearer.
And we'll get back to, unfortunately, your response to later Al-Qaeda terrorist attacks. But in between what happened to you in Saudi Arabia and then what happened to you post 9/11, I believe you served in the Balkans. Tell us a little bit about that deployment and what you were doing there and what you remember most from it.
I was deployed 11 months after returning from Saudi Arabia. I was deployed to the Balkans. I was in Bosnia. What I remember there, we worked in a mobile air staging facility, and we also did air evacuation. So on some days we were there, we would receive the patients from the Army aid stations. They would come and bring in the patients, and we would stage them and get them ready for air evacuation in a big tent called a mobile air staging facility. We would make sure that they were stable, that they had the medications, and that they were fed and they were ready for flight, so that when the aircraft arrived, it was a rapid transfer from there to the aircraft. And on other days, well, we rotated. On other days, we actually worked on the aircraft, and we flew with the patients and took care of them. And from Bosnia, our usual flight was into Germany for the patients to go to higher level of care at Landstuhl Medical Center.
What kind of planes did you generally use in these missions? And I know it extends into Iraq and Afghanistan as well, but I know you logged flawlessly, I think, over 2,300 hours in flight, 7 different airframes. So what was the most common type of craft that you used for these missions?
Well, we used the C-141 and the C-130, which were workhorses ever since Vietnam. We also used the KC-135 tanker and the newest aircraft, the C-17, and other aircraft depending on the mission. Well, we also used the C-21 aircraft.
So let's move to September 11th, 2001 now. First of all, where were you on the day of those attacks?
On September 11th, the morning of September 11th, I was home, and I was getting ready to go to my civilian job here with Riverside County Health.
And so, of course, as just about everyone knows now, Al-Qaeda hijacked 4 commercial airliners that day, attacked the World Trade Center, the Pentagon. The final plane was believed to be headed to Washington as well, but passengers forced it down. After what you had been through at Khobar Towers, what was going through your mind on that horrible day?
Well, once the second plane hit, of course, our minds were like, something is going on. This is not an accident. We need to get ready. All I could think of is we need to get ready. I looked around for my stuff. I talked to my boyfriend, which is also in the military. And then when we called the unit, we called the base. It's like, we're ready. What do you need us to do? So right away, we reported by phone to see, what actions they wanted us to take or what they needed us to do.
And so what did they have you do?
They still needed to receive instructions as well. As soon as they received instructions, we came into the base and, checked our equipment and helped at the unit, receiving messages, doing a 24 hours on the phone just to see if we were going to go out anywhere or what actions we were going to take.
When did you first deploy to Iraq or Afghanistan?
We actually, in 2003, we were called up, and there was about 4 or 5 crews that traveled together, and we deployed to Ramstein Air Base, Germany. At least that's where our hub was. My missions during that time, in between Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom, we traveled to Iraq. We traveled to Kuwait, and I also did a mission to Senegal.
Chief Keller, when you were serving in Iraq and helping to evacuate wounded service members, did you ever come under fire from the enemy? And if so, what was that like?
We often came under fire during takeoff and landing. Our aircraft was constantly being shot at. It was a bit disconcerting, a bit frightening. We were instructed to just get our Kevlar. We geared up as we were coming down and taking off, in an alert position just in case we needed to do anything. Fortunately, even so that some of the aircraft did get hit, we were not disabled, and we were able to continue our missions. Nothing happened while we were on the ground, and we were able to safely evacuate our patients.
How much time did you spend in Iraq?
Most of the time, we weren't there very long, not more than a couple of hours, because we needed to hurry up and get out of there, get the aircraft out, get the patients out safe. So we would come in and we would offload equipment and supplies for the people staying there, and we would hurry up and get our patients on. So everything was always going fast. It was, you had nurses giving report, and you had ground people helping with bringing in the litters and strapping them down so that everyone would be safe, bringing luggage, bringing medication in, special equipment if it was needed. Everything was happening at the same time. In the aircraft, the front end crew consisted of loadmasters. They would help. Sometimes the pilots would come off of the crew deck. They would be helping. It was all hands on to hurry up and get out of the ground because it was such a hot spot at the time.
You eventually served as Chief Enlisted Manager of the 403rd Aeromedical Staging Squadron. What did that leadership role require?
That was a different role than what I had in aeromedical evacuation. At this point, I was the top enlisted person of this mega squadron or group. It consisted of advising the commander of the morale, the welfare, and well-being and training of the troops under his command. This was some medical team that we needed to prepare to also deploy someday in a medical capacity. So it took a lot of oversight to get everybody properly trained, to send them to proper training locations, and to make sure the leaders were on board and very supportive. And also always keeping in mind that the people that we were training, they're human beings. They have families. They have regular situations like everybody else. So making sure that everybody was safe and that we were taking into consideration their family situations at the time as well.
What lessons would you have for young women considering entering the military or women already in the military looking to earn positions of greater leadership? What did you learn over those 26 plus years that could help them along the way?
I learned early on because, especially when you're younger and you come in and you meet all these friends, you do your training, but there's a lot of fun places and things to do, and you could stray away a little bit. I learned that you really need to concentrate, you need to study. You're not there to make friends. You're there to make a difference. You're there to do a job. So, keeping well balanced and focused is key, and always taking opportunities to educate yourself and just staying focused is the key in getting ahead, because there are many, many distractions, just like out in the civilian world. After work, there's just plenty of fun things to do that can distract you from studying a little bit more or taking an online class, just doing anything else. And it just takes a lot of focus and self-discipline to get ahead.
Chief Keller, first of all, it's a great honor to have you with us today, but I know not too long ago you also received another very interesting honor. You were named the Military Hero of the Week by the Los Angeles Chargers. What was that experience like?
That was a fun experience to get back into uniform and to go represent out in the stadium. It was a real fun and enlightening experience. It also gave me the opportunity to show young girls everywhere that they could also do what I do. They could also achieve any dream, because getting as far as I was able to get in the military was something actually that I didn't dream of. I just thought I'd just join and do my part, but I never thought I would be in a leadership role. So I think getting out there in the public and for them to be able to ask you questions and for you to be able to give testimony is very good for those seeking to be in military service or medical, or even to support the military. When you're out there in the community and they thanking you, but you're also thanking them for all the support they gave you, because without them, we can't do anything. So I think it was a very enriching experience.
And lastly, Chief Keller, 26 years, more than that, in uniform is a lot to consider in just a moment. But what are you most proud of from your time in the Air Force?
Wow. There are so many moments, but I guess the most proud of was when I would get called back from people that I had supervised or I had mentored, and they had reached their goals, their stepping stones. I was able to go back to graduations, was able to pin one of the nurses, one of my fellow coworkers that graduated from nursing school, UCLA. I was able to go to his pinning ceremony and be the person to put the pin on his lapel. Different things like that. Those are my proudest moments, is to give back to the younger generation coming up behind us and to leave it a better place.
Chief Keller, thank you very much for your time today. And of course, Therese, thank you very much for your time today. It's great to be with both of you. And Chief Keller, thank you again very much for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Retired U.S. Air Force Chief Master Sergeant Jo Keller served more than 26 years in uniform in the U.S. Air Force. Also, we've been joined by Therese Hughes, an acclaimed photographer and author. Her In a Heartbeat photography exhibit focusing on female veterans will be coming out as a book in March of 2021. I'm Greg Corombos. This is Veterans Chronicles.